These were 9 experienced backpackers. You're telling me that they all got severe hypothermia?
There's a door! Something's here.
Photography has become an integral part of modern life. In the past, each photo was worth its weight in gold. Today, I'll show you images that hide tragic stories so powerful they changed how we see the world forever. What if I told you there's a photo where a young man is smiling just hours before disappearing without a trace? Or that a TV game show contestant was actually a serial killer hiding in plain sight? These aren't movie plots. They're real stories captured in photographs that shocked the entire world. If you find these stories fascinating, give this video a quick like. It really helps the channel. Number 16. The Lenin and His Killer. This photograph capturing John Lennon and Mark Chapman was taken by Paul Goresh on December 8, 1980. Just hours before the world-famous leader of the Beatles was murdered. As it later turned out, this image showed John Lennon alongside the man who would kill him. Paul Goresh was a devoted fan of John Lennon's music. He frequently waited outside the singer's home, collecting autographs and taking photos with his idol and Lennon's wife, Yoko Ono. On December 8th, Paul was once again waiting near Lennon's Dakota apartment building in New York, hoping to meet him. At some point, a chubby man holding a copy of Double Fantasy, John and Yoko's latest studio album, approached him. This man was Mark Chapman, Lennon's future killer. When John and Yoko exited their home, Chapman asked Paul to take a picture of Lennon signing the album for him. Paul agreed and took the photo that Chapman had requested. After that, Paul went home, while Mark stayed behind. 6 hours later, Paul saw a television report announcing John Lennon's murder. Mark didn't even attempt to flee, and was soon arrested with the signed album still in his possession. Later, Paul told the press that he had captured a photograph of Lennon with his killer. Following this revelation, the New York Daily News offered Paul $2,000 just to visit their office and another $10,000 for the photograph itself. In the years that followed, Paul earned millions from the sale of the now iconic image, which became one of the most legendary photographs of the 20th century. The image is haunting when you realize that Chapman had already planned the murder when this photo was taken. The signed album, the seemingly innocent fan photo, it was all part of his disturbing preparation for the crime that would shock the world just hours later. But what if I told you there's a photograph that might have captured something even more sinister? A mysterious figure behind an unsuspecting victim who would soon vanish forever. Number 15. The Disappearance of Dalan Pua. This photograph shows 18-year-old Dalan Pua, who disappeared in February 2015 in Hawaii. The young man dreamed of climbing the famous haiku stairs, also known as the Stairway to Heaven. This staircase was built in 1942 and consists of 3,922 steps leading to the peak of the Ko'olau mountain range. It once housed a U.S. Navy radio tower, but over time, the site was abandoned. In 2013, the staircase was closed to visitors due to safety concerns, but that did not stop thrill seekers. Dalan was determined to visit the site despite his parents forbidding him from making the journey. Regardless of the dangers and warnings, he decided to follow his dream. On February 25th, he posted a photograph of the haiku stairs on social media, announcing that he planned to climb them the next day. During his hike, he sent photos to his relatives. In one of them, a strange silhouette resembling a humanoid figure appeared in the bushes behind him. Did Dalan notice this figure when he took the selfie? Did he sense he wasn't alone on the forbidden stairway? Sadly, Dalan never returned home. Search efforts included rescue teams, volunteers, drones, and even a U.S. Navy helicopter. However, neither the young man nor his body was ever found. Internet users speculate that the mysterious figure captured in the selfie may have been connected to his disappearance. Was it another hiker, a security guard, or something else entirely? The photograph remains one of the last traces of Dalan Pua, a haunting reminder of a young life that vanished without explanation. But not all shocking photos involve mystery. Some document incredible heroism in the face of certain death. Number 14. The death of Robert Lansberg, the ultimate sacrifice. In March 1980, scientists noticed something troubling. Mount St. Helens in Washington state was becoming active. The forecasts weren't promising, and experts expected a catastrophic eruption would soon begin. Research teams and photographers flocked to the volcano, including a man named Robert Lansberg. Lansberg had been collaborating with scientists for quite some time, and this assignment was special. He came to St. Helens not only to capture stunning images of the eruption, but also to assist volcanologists in their research. The volcano had been preparing to erupt for several weeks, with weak earthquakes occurring regularly. Scientists assumed the eruption would happen as it usually does, with an outburst of lava and ash. But things turned out differently. On May 18th of that year, St. Helens didn't just erupt, it exploded. At that fateful moment, Robert Lansberg was on its slope, his camera mounted on a tripod. Thanks to this setup, he was able to capture the beginning of the catastrophe in astonishing detail. But there was a problem, a deadly one. A wall of ice, rocks, and hot gas was rushing toward him at about 500 kilometers per hour. This pyroclastic flow is one of nature's most lethal forces. Lansberg realized in that moment that escape was impossible. What would you do if you knew these were your final moments alive? Robert Lansberg made an extraordinary decision. Instead of attempting to flee, he continued photographing what was happening with the volcano. When the pyroclastic flow was just moments away, the photographer calmly removed the film from his camera, placed it in his backpack, and lay on top of it, using his body as a shield to protect the unique footage. Lansberg perished in the eruption, but when rescue teams found his body days later, they also discovered his intact backpack with the film safely preserved inside. Thanks to his incredible courage and self-sacrifice, he managed to document all stages of the eruption in unprecedented detail. These photographs became the foundation of scientific reports and models that today help predict and anticipate the consequences of volcanic disasters. His final images weren't just photographs, they were his legacy to science and humanity. But what about photographs that show killers hiding in plain sight, celebrated by the public who had no idea of their crimes? I know these stories are intense, but we're just getting started. If you're finding these photographs as fascinating as I do, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know and ensures you don't miss the next shocking revelation. Number 13. The Dating Game Killer. In the 1970s, a popular American TV show called The Dating Game aired. According to the show's format, the main female contestant would ask questions to 3 bachelors whom she could hear but not see. She would then choose the one whose answers and voice appealed to her the most. In 1978, the show took a terrifying turn that no one could have anticipated. A man named Rodney Alcala appeared as a contestant. He introduced himself as a successful photographer with a passion for skydiving and motorcycle racing. Alcala had a charming smile and a charismatic presence. Moreover, he was handsome and well-groomed, immediately drawing attention from everyone on set. In that episode, 3 men, including Alcala, competed for a date with Cheryl Bradshaw, an attractive woman hoping to find love on the show. After a series of questions, Cheryl chose Alcala as her date. However, after talking to him backstage, she refused to go out with him. Later, she would tell producers that something about him made her uncomfortable. Her instincts couldn't have been more correct. It was later revealed that Alcala was a serial killer and rapist who had already served time in prison for assaulting a young girl. At the time of the show, he had already taken the lives of at least 2 women and would go on to kill several more. If Cheryl had agreed to the date, she could have found herself alone with one of America's most dangerous predators. The footage of Alcala on The Dating Game remains one of the most chilling artifacts in television history. A serial killer, hiding in plain sight, looking for victims on a lighthearted dating show. But Alcala wasn't the only killer to be accidentally captured on camera. Number 12. The Menendez brothers on a basketball card. What you see now is a collectible card featuring the famous basketball player Mark Jackson. For a long time, no one noticed anything unusual about it, but sharp-eyed fans eventually spotted the presence of two notorious murderers in the background, brothers Lyle and Eric Menendez. On August 20th, 1989, Lyle and Eric Menendez committed a horrific crime. They murdered their own parents. The murder was carried out with extreme brutality. When the police arrived at the scene, they initially believed the couple had been killed by experienced criminals. At the time, the brothers managed to avoid suspicion by deceiving investigators. They claimed they had gone to the movies and returned home to find their parents already dead. For months, they maintained their innocence while spending their father's fortune on luxury items. But why did the brothers kill their mother and father? It turns out they simply wanted to get their hands on their father's money. He was a wealthy businessman, and among their many extravagant purchases, including luxury cars and expensive watches, were tickets to a New York Knicks basketball game. It was at this very game that they were captured in the background of a photograph that later became a collectible basketball card. Just months after committing murder, there they were, sitting courtside at Madison Square Garden, immortalized on a basketball card that would be printed in the thousands. The brothers were finally arrested in 1996, but it wasn't until decades later, in 2018, that a Twitter user spotted them on the card and made the connection. Today, this card is a rare and highly sought-after item among collectors. On eBay, both uncertified and PSA-certified versions can fetch thousands of dollars, a macabre souvenir of two killers hiding in plain sight. But not all shocking photos document killers. Some preserve the final moments of people who had no idea they were about to face disaster. Number 11. The Columbia crew's final portrait. This photograph captures the crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia. All these people are happy and ready for their flight. Of course, none of the astronauts knew at the time that they would never return home. Columbia had built a reputation as a reliable shuttle over its 22-year career. It completed 28 missions and spent more than 300 days in space. On January 16, 2003, Columbia launched with 7 crew members on what would be its final mission. During launch, a piece of insulation material broke off and struck the left wing panel of the shuttle. Similar incidents had happened before, so NASA specialists did not consider it a serious issue. This decision would prove fatal. On February 1st, at 8:15 a.m., the shuttle began its descent. The astronauts eagerly anticipated their return home, but by 8:53 a.m., the sensors for the hydraulic system and pressure in the left landing gear had failed. At 8:59 a.m., communication with the shuttle was lost, and it disintegrated over Texas and Louisiana. All 7 crew members perished. It was later determined that the cause of the disaster was the very same damaged insulation part that NASA specialists had dismissed as insignificant. The Columbia crew became the 3rd group to die in NASA missions. The official portrait of the Columbia crew is now a haunting reminder of 7 lives cut short by what accident investigators later called a broken safety culture at NASA. But not all shocking photographs involve death. Some document human survival against impossible odds. Number 10. Mount Everest survivor, Beck Weathers. This picture captures Beck Weathers, a man who found himself in mortal danger, but against all odds, managed to survive. Weathers' survival story took place in 1996, at which time the 49-year-old American pathologist set out to conquer Everest as part of a group led by the experienced New Zealand mountaineer Rob Hall. Everest is the highest mountain on our planet. The weather conditions there are always unpredictable, which is why climbers are always prepared for the possibility that their ascent might be their last. This is exactly what happened to the group that included Weathers. On the night of May 10th-11th, the group was caught in a severe storm. The air temperature dropped to -60 degrees Celsius. Such freezing cold, strong winds, and a lack of oxygen made conditions extreme. The people were trapped and could not resist the forces of nature. Shortly before the expedition, Weathers had undergone surgery to treat nearsightedness and temporarily went blind due to the effects of ultraviolet light at high altitudes. He was completely exhausted and witnessed the deaths of other expedition members. It seemed that he had no chance either. The group leader, Rob Hall, suggested that Weathers stay at an altitude of about 400 meters from the summit. Hall himself went for help, but was unable to reach the camp and perished. Exhausted and frostbitten, Weathers attempted to descend to the camp on his own, but fell into a snowdrift. Incredibly, when the storm subsided, he woke up, and despite severe frostbite on his face and limbs, managed to make his way down. Upon reaching the camp, he encountered climbers who, seeing him, assumed that with such frostbite, he would not survive. But Weathers proved them wrong. Unfortunately, doctors had to amputate his hands, toes, and nose, which was later reconstructed using tissue from his forehead and ears. But the most important thing was that the man miraculously survived. Today, Beck Weathers is 77 years old, and he does not regret his terrifying journey in the slightest. The photographs of Weathers after his rescue are shocking, his face blackened by frostbite, his hands necrotic. Yet they also represent one of the most incredible survival stories ever documented. They show the resilience of the human spirit and the will to live that can triumph even in the most extreme circumstances. But some shocking photographs document not survival against nature, but humanity's darkest impulses. Number 9. The Radium Girls. These photographs were taken in the 1920s in the United States. They show smiling young women painting watch dials. However, none of them realized that their job was putting their lives in mortal danger. The story, now known as the Radium Girls case, began in the 1920s when the United States Radium Corporation opened factories in several American cities to produce watches with glowing dials. The paint used for the dials contained radium and was marketed under the brand name Undark. None of the women were warned about the dangers of working with radium. Moreover, they worked in regular clothing without any protective measures against radiation. The most horrifying part was that the factory workers would lick their paintbrushes to keep the tips fine, and sometimes for fun, they even painted their nails and teeth to make them glow in the dark. A few years later, all the young women working in these factories began experiencing severe health problems. Many were diagnosed with anemia and jaw necrosis, and 15 women became terminally ill. Unfortunately, they could not be saved. Despite lawsuits, the United States Radium Corporation continued operating until 1939. The victims received small compensation payments, while the factory owners faced no punishment. The photographs of these women, smiling and unaware of the poison they were handling daily, stand as a chilling reminder of corporate negligence and the human cost of scientific ignorance. Their legal battle, however, helped establish workers' right to sue their employers for occupational diseases. But what about photographs that preserve truly unsettling mysteries? Images from events so strange they've never been fully explained? Number 8. The Diatlov Pass Incident. The story of the Diatlov group's death is one of the most mysterious and tragic in the world. To this day, what happened to these people remains unknown. The leader of the group, which consisted of 9 students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, was an experienced hiker named Igor Diatlov. At the end of January 1959, these young people set off on a ski trip. They planned to climb the peaks of Otorten and Kolatsyakho, then reach the village of Vizhai, from where they were supposed to report the completion of their route on February 12th. However, on the designated day, the group did not appear in the village. On February 19th, it was decided to launch a search and rescue operation. The search lasted a week, and only on February 26th was the group's tent found on the slope of the mountain, cut open from the inside. However, there was no one inside. Not far from the tent, tracks in the snow led toward the forest. This suggested that the hikers had left the tent in a hurry. Rescuers began examining the surrounding area, and within a 1.5-kilometer radius of the tent, they found the bodies of all the group members. The young people's bodies showed signs of frostbite as well as various injuries. Some had fractured skulls, broken ribs, and one was missing her tongue. Even more puzzling, their clothing contained high levels of radiation. There are numerous theories about what happened, ranging from natural causes to mystical explanations and even Soviet military experiments. The official investigation concluded that the group's death was an accident caused by a natural force. According to this version, on February 1st, 1959, the hikers reached the eastern slope of Mount Kholat Syakhl and decided to camp there for the night. During the night, the weather worsened significantly, and strong, gusty winds triggered an avalanche. Presumably, upon hearing the sound of the approaching avalanche, the students cut open the tent and ran down the slope. They attempted to build a fire near a large cedar tree, but the severe frost and wind took their toll. This hypothesis reasonably explains the Diatlov group's deaths, but many people disagree with it and believe that the students were victims of a violent attack. The injuries on their bodies support this theory, which is why the Diatlov incident continues to remain an enigmatic tragedy that haunts us to this day. The few photographs recovered from the hikers' cameras are among the last images of the group alive, showing them smiling and enjoying their journey, completely unaware of the horror that awaited them. But what about photographs that seem to capture something that shouldn't be there? Something supernatural. Number 7. The Stanley Hotel Ghost. The Stanley Hotel is located in Estes Park, Colorado. It was built in 1909 by the Stanley family and remained an ordinary hotel for many years. However, starting in the 1980s, the hotel staff and guests began sharing eerie stories about ghosts haunting its halls. According to these stories, the hotel sometimes echoes with the sound of Mrs. Stanley's antique piano playing on its own, and the spirit of Mr. Stanley occasionally appears in the billiard room. Old buildings are often associated with ghostly legends, so many people were skeptical of these tales. However, thanks to photographs taken by a hotel guest named Henry Yao, the stories about the spirits of the Stanleys stopped being just myths. Yao's photograph went viral on the internet because it captured a figure that clearly resembled a ghost. According to the photographer, he simply wanted to take a picture of the hotel's grand staircase, but when reviewing the image later, he noticed the mysterious figure. Yao also insists that there was no one on the staircase at the moment he took the shot. After this photograph was published online, the Stanley Hotel became incredibly popular. Because of this, critics believe that the ghost story is a clever marketing tactic to attract new guests. However, this hotel has been famous for a long time, as it was the very place that inspired the renowned writer Stephen King to create the blockbuster novel The Shining. Whether the ghostly figure in Yao's photograph is genuine or fabricated, it has secured its place among the most famous ghost photographs ever taken. But some shocking photographs don't involve ghosts or mysteries. They document the bizarre cultural practices of the past. Number 6. PostMortem Photography. In 1839, Joseph Niepce and Louis Daguerre developed the first technology for creating photographs. This marked the beginning of the great era of photography. Of course, in the 19th century, a photographic portrait was considered a luxury that few could afford. However, despite this, an unusual and eerie style of photography called postmortem became popular during the daguerreotype era. It involved photographing deceased individuals. Undoubtedly, portraits of the dead seemed disturbing to modern people, but at that time, things were different. The main clients for postmortem photographs were parents who had lost children. In the 19th century, child mortality was high, and such images became the only way to preserve the memory of a lost child. To make the deceased appear more lifelike, they were given makeup and dressed in festive clothing, while special stands were used to keep their bodies upright. Over time, people began photographing not only deceased children, but also their departed relatives. Back then, such a photo shoot was a significant event that the entire family prepared for. As time passed, the trend of postmortem photography faded, and society changed its perception of it. However, this style remains an integral part of photographic history and continues to surprise and shock modern viewers. These haunting images provide a window into how differently past generations viewed death, not as something to be hidden away, but as a solemn occasion to be documented and remembered. But what about photos that document the transformation of ordinary people into something monstrous? Number 5. The Stanford Prison Experiment. This photograph was taken in 1971. It captures participants in a chilling experiment known as the Stanford Prison Experiment. This study was conducted by social psychologist Philip Zimbardo at the request of the U.S. Navy to investigate the nature of conflicts in the Marine Corps and correctional institutions. 24 Stanford University students were selected to participate in the experiment. The main criteria for participants were good physical health and psychological stability. The students were randomly divided into two groups. The first group was assigned the role of guards, while the second group played the role of prisoners. The experiment took place in the basement of the psychology department, which was converted into a makeshift prison. Participants were given uniforms corresponding to their assigned roles, and from that point, a real-life psychological transformation began, blurring the lines between research and reality. The student guards started coming up with various punishments to assert control over the student prisoners, while the prisoners gradually became more emotionally distressed. Two of them even had to withdraw from the experiment and seek psychological help. Initially, Philip Zimbardo planned for the experiment to last 2 weeks, but he did not anticipate how quickly the psychological transformation of the students would occur. In the end, he was forced to terminate the study on the 6th day. This experiment demonstrated how profoundly a situation can influence human behavior, overpowering personal values and character traits. The photographs from this experiment, showing normal college students transformed into cruel guards and broken prisoners in less than a week, remain some of the most disturbing images in the history of psychology. They force us to ask uncomfortable questions. What would we do in similar circumstances? Are we as immune to situational influences as we'd like to believe? But some shocking photographs document not just psychological transformation, but physical transformation due to supernatural or psychiatric causes. Number 4. Analisa Michel, the real Emily Rose. This photograph shows Analisa Michel, a young woman who became the inspiration for the protagonist of the horror film The Exorcism of Emily Rose. This is what Analisa looked like before her terrifying ordeal. In later photographs, she appeared completely different. Analisa Michel was born in 1952 in Germany and grew up in a deeply religious family. She attended Mass twice a week, sang in the church choir, and prayed the rosary. Nothing seemed unusual about her until, at age 16, she suddenly lost consciousness. After that, she began experiencing nightly convulsions. During these episodes, she was barely aware of her surroundings. After consulting a neurologist, Analisa was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. She was prescribed medication, but it had no effect. Her condition worsened, and she began hearing demonic voices and seeing their faces at night. Her devout family turned to priests for help, but they initially refused. Eventually, as Analisa's condition deteriorated, she started barking like a dog and eating inedible objects. Father Ernst Alt agreed to perform an exorcism. Local bishops permitted the ritual, but insisted that it remained secret. Over 10 months, Analisa underwent 67 Catholic exorcism rites. Unfortunately, the exorcisms failed to cure her, and she ultimately died at the age of 23 from dehydration and malnutrition. The priests who conducted the exorcisms were found guilty of negligent homicide and sentenced to 6 months in prison and 3 years of probation. Analisa's parents were exempt from punishment. Photographs of Analisa during her possession show a dramatically changed young woman, emaciated, with dark circles under her wild eyes. These images, coupled with audio recordings of her exorcism sessions, present a deeply disturbing document of either severe mental illness or, as some believe, something supernatural. Whatever your belief about what happened to Analisa Michel, her photographs remain among the most disturbing images ever captured. A young woman transformed by forces that, to this day, remain disputed. But what about photographs of the elite engaging in bizarre, disturbing rituals? Number 3. The Rothschilds' Illuminati Ball. Themed parties are a very popular form of entertainment for modern people. However, none of them can compare to the masquerade ball that the wealthiest family of German bankers, the Rothschilds, hosted in 1972. Photographs from this event still intrigue and unsettle people, and it is no surprise that this party was named the Illuminati Ball. The ball took place at the Rothschild family estate. Naturally, only the elite of society were invited, which added a special ambiance to the event. The eerie atmosphere of the celebration was created not only by the costumes and masks. It is said that among the dishes on the table lay broken dolls, symbolizing occult rituals. However, the stylized appearance of the family and their guests also deserves special attention. The hostess of the house chose to appear as a sacrifice offered to Baphomet, wearing a headdress in the form of a deer's head with diamond tears. Some guests wore masks with double faces, while one of the invitees had a birdcage placed on her head. The designer of the costumes and decorations for this event was none other than Salvador Dali. The photographs were taken by Baron Alexis de Rede. It is quite possible that no one would have ever known how the elite of that time entertained themselves if Baron de Rede had not fallen out with the Rothschilds. After their dispute, he published the pictures in the press. Although these photographs still shock the public, some people see nothing criminal in this masquerade and believe that the event was simply an extravagant party, albeit one with disturbing symbolism that has fueled conspiracy theories for decades. The images from this ball reveal a hidden world of the ultra-wealthy that few ordinary people ever glimpse, a world where even their entertainment seems designed to unsettle and provoke. But what about photographs that document the militarization of childhood? Number 2. Children in gas masks. This photograph was taken in 1937 by the famous Soviet photographer Victor Bulla. It captures about 100 young pioneers wearing gas masks. Today, this image seems strange and somewhat unsettling, but what might be even more confusing is why all these children were gathered in a field near the forest, and why they were made to wear gas masks. The reason lies in the fact that after World War I, countries were actively preparing for the next war. This image clearly illustrates the military training that young pioneers underwent in case of a sudden enemy attack. Since children are the future, the Soviet government put great effort into protecting them. For this reason, children received military training as part of their school education. The youth were taught how to handle weapons, provide first aid to the injured, and learn about self-defense measures. Interestingly, the Soviet Union was not the only country to conduct such military training among children. Other nations also used similar tactics to protect the younger generation. Similar photographs of children wearing gas masks taken in European countries can be found on the internet. These images, now nearly a century old, seem almost post-apocalyptic to modern viewers. They serve as eerie reminders of a time when the shadow of war loomed so large that even childhood was militarized. But perhaps the most disturbing photographs are those that document the complete destruction of an innocent child's life by those who should have protected them. Number 1. Jeanie Wy, the feral child. In this portrait, you see a girl named Jeanie Wy. At first glance, she may seem like an ordinary teenager, but if you look into her eyes, you will see emptiness. Jeanie Wy was born in 1957 and endured 13 years of severe abuse at the hands of her father, Clark Wy. This girl suffered countless acts of cruelty and violence and was completely isolated in a small room for all those years. In 1970, Jeanie's mother finally escaped with her daughter and turned to local social services. The service workers were shocked by the girl's condition. At 13 years old, she weighed only 26 kilograms. She did not know how to speak, use cutlery, or even a toilet. Jeanie's mother explained that her child had become this way due to her father. However, despite the trial, neither of Jeanie's parents faced any punishment. Jeanie's father committed suicide the day before his court appearance, leaving a note that read, "The world will never understand." Jeanie was removed from her family. Throughout her life, she was adopted multiple times, but she continued to suffer abuse in foster care. Today, Jeanie is 66 years old and resides in a nursing home in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, due to her own father's brutality, her life was completely and irreversibly shattered. Photographs of Jeanie after her rescue became powerful evidence in the study of language acquisition and child development. Her case showed that if a child is not exposed to language during critical developmental periods, they may never fully acquire it, a revelation that changed our understanding of how humans learn. Segment 16. Conclusion and Reflection. Photography has grown from a rare luxury to something we do hundreds of times a day with our smartphones. We capture moments casually, often without thinking about their significance. But as we've seen in this journey through history's most shocking photographs, a single image can tell a story more powerful than thousands of words. From the final photographs of the Colombia crew to the last images of the Diatlov hikers, from accidental captures of killers to documenting human suffering, these photographs force us to confront realities we might prefer to ignore. They remind us that behind every image is a story, sometimes heroic, sometimes tragic, sometimes mysterious. They teach us about human nature, about courage and cruelty, about survival and sacrifice. So next time you take a photograph, remember its power. Remember that you're not just capturing light and shadow, you're freezing a moment in time that might someday tell a story to someone who wasn't there to witness it. And that's the true magic of photography, its ability to make absent things present, to make the past current, to make the dead live again in our memories. I hope these stories and images have given you something to think about. If you enjoyed this journey through photography's most shocking moments, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything and helps me bring more fascinating stories like these to light. Let me know in the comments which of these photographs you found most shocking, or if there are other historical images you'd like me to cover in future videos.